Hey everyone, how's it going? Matthew Kadish here, author of the Earthman Jack Space Saga, available on Amazon in both paperback and ebook format. And today we are going to cover some big news coming out of the TV realm and the streaming realm. And that is that Amazon's Lord of the Rings, the series that Amazon is spending over $1 billion to bring to its subscribers, finds its creative fellowship. Basically, they're announcing that they have hired people to be the showrunners on this Lord of the Rings TV show that they're producing. For those of you who don't know, showrunners are basically the day-to-day producers on a TV show. They're the head writers, head storytellers, and basically they're the shot callers. In filmmaking, directors tend to be the shot callers because they're the one kind of shepherding the making of the movie. But in TV, it's different. Directors come on for episode to episode, whereas the producers are kind of oversee the entire series as a whole. And so there was a lot of speculation lately leading up to this announcement that Game of Thrones producers, Benioff and Weiss, were going to be the ones that Amazon hired to basically take on the Lord of the Rings. And that had a lot of people concerned because, well, let's face it, the last season of Game of Thrones was pretty awful, and it's becoming pretty well known that Benioff and Weiss are not good storytellers. They're not good writers. But basically, the rumor started because they've been shopping around what's called an overall deal to a couple of different studios, and basically that overall deal includes like movie, TV, all types of stuff. That when they sign with a studio, they're there to develop these things. Now, keep in mind, Benioff and Weiss are currently under contract with Lucasfilm and Disney to produce 3 Star Wars movies, a new Star Wars trilogy. So they've got that going on, but their overall deal with their production company that they're shopping around is something completely different from that, and it's on top of that as well. So one of the studios that was heavily, kind of looking into giving them a deal was Amazon. And because of that, and because of Benioff and Weiss's association with, creating arguably one of the most popular fantasy TV shows ever made, I think a lot of people were kind of speculating that they were going to be brought on to handle the Lord of the Rings show. And I think that would have been a terrible idea because not only are Benioff and Weiss awful writers, but they just seem like the wrong fit for J.R.R. Tolkien. Now, that being said, it looks like that rumor was completely unfounded because Benioff and Weiss are going to have nothing to do with this Lord of the Rings adaptation over at Amazon, and we're going to go through this article at Vulture where they announce the people who are actually going to be taking that leadership role in the series. Amazon Prime's big-budget Lord of the Rings series has locked in its key creative team, including the 2 men who will lead production on the series, J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay. Now, keep these guys in mind because I'm going to talk about them in a little bit. The Star Trek 4 writers brought on a year ago to write and develop the show for the streamer have now officially been named executive producers and showrunners for the project, Amazon announced on Saturday. The duo don't have any previous experience running a TV show, but there's precedent for untested film writers being handed massive tentpole series. David Benioff and D.B. Weiss were famously television production neophytes when HBO handed them hundreds of millions of dollars to adapt Game of Thrones for the screen. What's more, just as HBO did with Thrones, Amazon is surrounding Payne and McKay with a team of seasoned production and writing vets. In addition to previously announcing the hiring of J.A. Bayona, Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, to direct the first 2 episodes and executive produce, Payne and McKay have assembled an all-star team, or as the duo said in a release announcing the team, a fellowship of writers, producers, and craft persons to bring their version of J.R.R. Tolkien's world to life. And kind of list these guys, we'll go through them in a bit. But what I want to do is I want to circle back around to J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay. Now, a lot of you guys out there probably have never heard of these dudes before, but they've been around and working in Hollywood for quite some time. I don't think they've ever had anything actually produced. And I recognize these guys from their association with Star Trek. A while back, I wrote a big expose over on medium.com about the Star Trek Civil War and all the crazy things that are going on with the rights to Star Trek and stuff like that. And in my research for those exposés, I came across these guys. And basically, after Into Darkness, when J.J. Abrams stepped away from the Star Trek franchise to just produce it as opposed to being involved in the writing or the directing, the guy who kind of was the heir apparent to inherit the Star Trek franchise was Roberto Orci, who at the time was the writing partner of Alex Kurtzman. Now, they were kind of together in producing movies and TV shows, and around this time, Kurtzman and Orci split up, and Kurtzman moved over to Sony and Universal, where he was working on the Spider-Man franchise and the proposed Dark Universe franchise for Universal. And Orci was staying over at Paramount to handle the Star Trek franchise, and he was a first-time director, and he was slated to originally direct Star Trek 3, which eventually became Star Trek Beyond. And when he was tasked with writing Star Trek 3, J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay were his co-writers. Basically, these guys come from the stable of Bad Robot writers that J.J. Abrams' company kind of incubates. And Orci kind of pulled these guys in to help him out with his script. Now, because Orci was a first-time director, like he'd never directed anything before, and he was kind of preparing to be the new director for this multi-million-dollar Star Trek movie, one of the things that Paramount wrote into the contract with him was that his directing of Star Trek 3 was entirely dependent upon their approval of his script. So if they didn't like his script, he wasn't going to direct the project. And apparently, rumor has it that the script that J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay created with Roberto Orci was so bad that Paramount shut the production down and fired Orci on the spot. So that does not speak to a lot of confidence in terms of J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay, because first of all, they were brought up through the Bad Robot production house, which is the J.J. Abrams School of Filmmaking. Now, whether you love J.J. or hate J.J. For his habitual reboots of beloved franchises, he's actually responsible for bringing a lot of people up through the Hollywood system. Kurtzman and Orci, for instance, were one of the Bad Robot writers that kind of hit it big in Hollywood. And so J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay were kind of like considered to be the new Orci and Kurtzman in terms of like their potential for creating blockbuster movies. But they've never actually had anything produced. I think that the one thing that they have going on right now is this movie that they wrote for Disney called Jungle Cruise. And it was basically, they took a ride and made a movie out of it, and it's going to be coming out starring The Rock in a little bit. But we've never actually seen anything that these guys have written get made. And the idea that they're the ones who are going to be the lead writers and head producers on The Lord of the Rings, considering that they've never actually made anything before, is a little bit troubling. It's just a little bit troubling. Like, I almost might have preferred Benioff and Weiss getting the role, because at least with them, we'd know what to expect. But I'm glad it's not Benioff and Weiss, and considering the fact that we don't know anything about J.D. Payne or Patrick McKay, there is potential for them to turn in something good. And, it says here in this article that they were attached to write Star Trek 4. From what I believe, they were briefly considered for that, but Star Trek 4 was kind of canceled because of various budgetary and legal issues. So, they're not involved in the Star Trek franchise anymore. But the one thing that they did write for Star Trek 3 ended up being so bad that Paramount basically, nixed it. So the question is, will these guys be able to do justice to The Lord of the Rings? Now, they've been involved with Amazon's adaptation of this from pretty much the beginning, which is my understanding. They just weren't officially named the people in charge. So they were kind of in the development process with this once Amazon got the rights to it. I don't know how they got attached. My guess is that it had something to do with their association with Bad Robot or something along those lines. It's really hard to say. But somehow they finagled their way into the Lord of the Rings production, and now they are completely in charge of it. And so the question becomes, who have they surrounded themselves with, and will these people help these guys to turn in a good TV show? Now, the first guy that we have here is J.A. Bayona, who was the director of Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. And basically, he's set to direct the first 2 episodes of the series. And the guy who directs the pilot episode is usually the guy who kind of sets the stage for all the stuff to come. So it's a very big position there. Now, I didn't much care for Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom. I didn't think it was a well-written movie, but that's not Bayona's fault. He basically was a director for hire, and he came on board that movie. I think he turned in a pretty decent film in terms of how it looked and the pacing and stuff like that. It was just the script was a mess, in my opinion. So here are some more people that are among the fellowship team that these guys have announced. And we start off with Jennifer Hutchison from Breaking Bad. That's pretty good. Jason Cahill from The Sopranos. That's pretty good too. And Justin Doble from Stranger Things, another really good thing. And they're joining as writers and executive producers. So these are 3 writers and producers who are coming from very, very good shows. And they're joining the writing team. So that's a good thing right off the bat. Former HBO production chief Bruce Richmond, who helped oversee Game of Thrones and recently left the cable network, is on board as an exec producer and is former Bad Robot exec Lindsay Weber, 10 Cloverfield Lane, who left the J.J. Abrams production company last fall to join Team Amazon. Now, she might have been the ones to bring in Payne and McKay, since she has that Bad Robot connection, and that's the only direct connection I can make between these 2 guys and Amazon. So that might have been it. But Bruce Richmond, who was HBO production chief, that's a very good person to have on board, because he was really, I think, the guy who kind of made sure that Game of Thrones production-wise didn't go off the rails, and was a big help to Benioff and Weiss in terms of just getting the show made. Game of Thrones writer Brian Cogman and Stephanie Followsome, Toy Story 4, will be consulting producers, while Ron Ames, the Aviator, is on board as producer. Now, this guy, Brian Cogman, he was actually Benioff and Weiss's coffee boy on Game of Thrones. I believe he was like the husband of one of their assistants, and he kind of wormed his way into the production, and he eventually kind of became a writer. And so it was announced a while back that he had gotten hired onto the Lord of the Rings show on Amazon as one of these consulting producers. And basically he's what they call the lore master. He's this guy who basically knows Lord of the Rings insides and outs. And so he can kind of fact check and be like the guy that they can ask questions of, what's this fantasy land called, or what's this race, what color does this race wear, whatever it may be. He's the guy they go to kind of figure out what's the correct way to incorporate elements of the Lord of the Rings lore into the show. Helen Shang, Hannibal, will be a writer and co-producer. That's pretty good. Hannibal was an excellent TV show. While Glenise Mullins will serve as a writing consultant. Never heard of her before, but okay. Non-writing exec producers on the show will be Gene Kelly, Boardwalk Empire, and former Amazon exec Sharon Tal Yigado. Fun fact, non-writing Game of Thrones exec producer Carolyn Strauss was head of HBO Entertainment before she joined the Game of Thrones team. The creative tech team today includes costume designer Kate Howley, Suicide Squad, production designer Rick Heinrichs, Star Wars The Last Jedi, visual effects supervisor Jason Smith, The Revenant, and Tolkien scholar Tom Shippey, and illustrator and concept artist John Howe. So that's basically the production team that is going to be supporting Payne and McKay as they go forward, bringing the Lord of the Rings TV show to life on Amazon. From what I'm seeing here, I think they've surrounded themselves with a great deal of good people. Everyone here has a good background, especially in the writing department. I think they've definitely assembled some really good writers there. The question is, can these freshman producers and writers really turn in a legendary property like Lord of the Rings and make it the next great TV show, especially considering all Amazon has writing on it? I mean, they've shelled out a bunch of money for this property. It's over $1 billion, and that's for like the rights to do it, and all the production costs and stuff like that. Like, they've basically thrown all in with Lord of the Rings. So my guess is Amazon is very impressed and confident in Payne and McKay's ability to turn in this TV show if they're willing to hand them the keys to this kingdom. And the question is the team surrounding them going to be able to help them bring this vision to life? And I certainly hope so. I'm just glad that Benioff and Weiss have no involvement on it. And Brian Cogman, whatever you think of him, at least he's in a position to really not do any actual harm to the show. So guys, what do you think of this? Are you excited that The Lord of the Rings has finally found its head writers and showrunners? Do you think Amazon's take on the source material is going to be good? Do you think the show is going to be good? What are your thoughts? Are you glad that Benioff and Weiss are not any way, shape, or form involved in this? Let me know in the comments. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel for more movie news, TV news, and entertainment news and analysis. This is Matthew Kadish, and I will catch you guys in the next video.